Hello and welcome to EDUC 169. I've been asked by the conveyor of EDUC 221 to present a lecture on peer-assisted learning for you first years. As I understand it, you don't have really any contact with peer-assisted learning or path is short, so I'm going to break into that first of what is peer-assisted learning. Now, peer-assisted learning can be broken down into, well, interesting enough, two components. We have peer and we have assisted learning. Now, the first aspect, peer, is very important. A peer is a fellow member of your environment or cohort, someone who is equal to you. So this could be a classmate, this could be a student, this could be your friend, workmate, and so forth and so on. Someone who's on the equal level to you. Now, this does not necessarily guarantee that you are the same intellectual level as this person, and that's very critical for what comes later on in this discussion. You may be students, but that does not mean you have the same intellectual level. Now, the second part of peer-assisted learning is assisted learning. Now, assisted learning really does mean to be assisted in your learning, and that's very critical you understand this. It's to be assisted in your learning. This does not mean that someone does all the learning for you. For example, this is a book summary. In a book summary, someone has gone through the book and worked through the entire thing and written a book summary, obviously. And if you only read the book summary, you're not having your learning assisted, you're letting someone do all the learning for you. Now, an example of assisted learning in terms of a book would be working with another person to work through every single chapter. What do you think about this? What do you think about this? Bounce ideas back. What does the author think? And so forth and so on. Now that you've understood what peer and assisted learning means, we can understand what PAL means. So, PAL is the use of your fellow peers to enhance your own learning, or the use of students to assist their fellow students in their learning, which really means students teaching students. And as a teacher, that's the best thing you can want, is students working together to gain information. Now, there are generally 6 methods of peer-assisted learning, but there is a fair bit of overlapping. So we have peer monitoring, peer assessment, peer tutoring, peer education, peer counseling, and peer modeling. Now, if they all sound slightly similar to each other, that's because they are. They're just 6 different aspects. And when you're using peer-assisted learning, you can use as many of these methods as possible when doing so. So, for example, peer assessment and peer modeling work very well together. You do not have to use simply one method. You can use multiple methods. But for this lecture, I'm going to give you the example of peer modeling. So peer modeling is using higher performing students to act as models for lower performing students. In essence, this means is you've got a group of students who work together with a rather intellectual student, giving out information and acting as a model and a guideline for the lower performing students. Now, these models should be taught before class on how to disseminate information. And what this means is, I'm sure you can all relate to this. I'm sure when you were in high school, which most of you recently were, you had a student in your class who was very, very, very smart, but worked by themselves. Yeah. They didn't talk to many people. They didn't have a lot of social skills, in essence, during their learning. A lone wolf of sorts, if you'd allow me to use that term. What this means is if you take this lone wolf and you bring them into a group and say, go teach, go model, they will react negatively because they're not used to telling others how to learn, because they're only used to working with themselves. So you would have to model, or you would have to tutor these models on how to, well, in essence, act like a model, how to give out information, how to give out instruction, how to, I'm not going to say dumb it down, but bring it to the level of the lower performing students. Now I'm going to give you a quick lesson plan. I'm not going to read through all of it, I'm not going to work through all of it, but I'm going to give you a general idea, and you're welcome to read this in your own time. This is just a basic little lesson plan. This works on peer assessment and peer modeling. So, Students at the beginning of the class are given an image on a worksheet. By themselves, they then work through this image to create a plan and a draft of a story they'd like to write. So they brainstorm a draft. This plan needs to include a story outline, so forth and so on, and the plan must be relevant to the image itself. This task, however, must be limited to 5 minutes. You can't have any more than 5 minutes. Students will then be placed into groups of 4. You generally don't want any modeling groups higher than 4 because it becomes too hard for the model to maintain control of the group, as there are students who are rowdy, don't want to work, don't like the model, so forth and so on. These groups as well will be comprised of students with mixed ability. So an easy way to do this is have a list of your best students, or a list of all your students in grade marks, best at the top, worst at the bottom, or falling at the bottom, I should say. Grab 1 from the top, 3 from the bottom, 1 from the top, 3 from the bottom, and work your way up. So at each end, you have the best students working with the most low performing students, and then in the middle you've got average students with slightly better than average students working together. But generally the model will be a fair bit higher performing than the rest of the group. Now in these groups, they will work together to examine how each group member has gone about their brainstorming, how they have planned their idea, how they organize materials, thoughts, discussions, chosen techniques, so forth and so on. Here peer assessment comes into it, as the peers assess themselves and assess their peers on their methods in writing. Next, teacher provides a new image. Each group goes into its individual student again, and they have to write, not plan, but write a creative writing piece about this new image. Again, limited to 5 minutes. After the 5 minutes elapse, the students come back together and they evaluate each other's creative writing pieces and provide each other with constructive feedback. Now, there are a lot of benefits to peer modeling. First and foremost, students will react differently to information from their peers than from teachers. Just the way it is. If your friend tells you something, you're much more likely to accept it than if your teacher tells you something. It's to do with the authoritarian nature of education itself and direct information. And second, it allows a form of self-policing. By having such a small group, the model can maintain control of the group. That means the teacher, you, will have a larger degree of mobility to move around the classroom and work with the groups which are struggling or don't understand something, and so forth on, or simply just check, see how everyone's going. Now this also teaches students not just the content of what they're learning, but also high performing students integrate information. How do they do this? What techniques do they do? So forth and so on. This then in turn allows students to adopt social components of learning, such as enthusiasm, shared learning, and cooperation. There are, however, limitations to this, and we've discussed it before. It requires the models to have prior training. If the students cannot convey the information correctly, they will have the exact opposite effect. There will be a negative impact, students won't want to learn, the class gets rowdy, it's just not a good environment. Alright, thank you very much for listening to my lecture, EDUC 169. I hope that you've learned something about peer-assisted learning and its applications in today, and I hope that you will look at the world now and see all the different forms of peer-assisted learning. One of the most common ones you will find in university is that of peer-reviewed journals. The peers of the article writer are reviewing peer assessment, a journal, and then providing their feedback. Otherwise, I hope you have a lovely day, and I hope to talk to you soon.